run $1 billion empire, and I can't even fix a damn car. That was the moment Daniel Whitmore, CEO, polished, powerful, and always in control, realized he was completely helpless. Stranded on a scorching, deserted highway with steam rising from his luxury Maserati, Daniel had everything money could buy, except a way out. Minutes from the biggest pitch of his career, with no signal and no help in sight, his world was slipping through his fingers, until she showed up. Aaliyah Carter, a grease-streaked mechanic with steady hands and eyes that didn't flinch, offered him help without hesitation. But it wasn't her skill that stopped him cold. It was the ring on her finger, a delicate silver band with a sapphire stone, the same ring he gave to a little girl 20 years ago beneath a tree with a promise he never kept. Their unexpected reunion is no coincidence. It's the spark that ignites a storm of buried truths, stolen legacies, and a family torn apart by ambition. And at the center of it all, a forgotten promise, a hidden past, and a truth powerful enough to bring down everything the Whitmore name was built on. The desert roads stretched endlessly beneath the unforgiving sun, cracked and forgotten. Like a scar across the earth, heat shimmered off the asphalt in ghostly waves, distorting the horizon. A sleek black Maserati sat stranded at the roadside. Its hood popped open, a thick plume of steam curling toward the sky like a warning flare. Inside the driver's seat, Daniel Whitmore cursed under his breath and slammed both hands against the steering wheel. "Damn it," he growled, checking his platinum watch for the 5th time. 11:43 a.m. In just 17 minutes, he was supposed to be standing in front of the most powerful investors in the country, unveiling a project that could redefine the legacy of the Whitmore name. Instead, he was stuck here, trapped, powerless. Sweat soaked through the back of his $1,000 silk shirt, clinging to his skin like guilt. His tie hung loose around his neck, his jacket discarded in the passenger seat. He stepped out, blinking against the sun's blinding glare, and approached the smoking engine as if it had personally betrayed him. He had no idea what he was looking at. To him, it might as well have been a pile of wires and boiling metal. The man who controlled $1 billion empire, couldn't fix his own car. That irony wasn't lost on him. Then, a sound. An old dusty pickup rumbled into view, its engine crackling like it had weathered more storms than years. Daniel straightened, eyes narrowing with suspicion as the truck rolled to a stop a few yards behind him. The driver's door creaked open. A woman stepped out. She wore faded jeans smudged with oil, a red plaid shirt rolled up at the sleeves, and a pair of worn boots that had seen more grit than his whole life. Her skin glowed a deep bronze under the harsh sunlight, her tight curls pulled back into a practical bun. Calm, collected, unbothered. She approached without hesitation. "Need some help?" she asked, her voice smooth, grounded, utterly unshaken by his Armani scowl or irritated energy. "I have a crucial meeting in 15 minutes, Daniel replied, not even trying to mask his frustration. "My assistant was supposed to send someone, but there's no damn signal out here." She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Instead, she walked straight past him, eyes focused on the engine. "Cooling system's shot," she muttered after a few seconds. "I can patch it up. It won't last long, but it'll get you to the city." Daniel stared at her, disbelief etched across his sweat-slicked face. "Are you sure?" She met his eyes, unwavering. "I'm a mechanic," she said simply. "I run a shop 10 miles from here." Without waiting for approval, she turned back to her truck and grabbed her tools. Every move was precise, economic. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Daniel stood there stunned as she rolled up her sleeves and began working. Her hands, small but strong, moving with a surgeon's confidence. "5 more minutes and you'd have blown the engine completely," she said flatly, not even looking up. "These things are powerful but delicate, like some people." Her words cut through him sharper than the sun. He opened his mouth to respond, then stopped, swallowing hard. Something about her, it unsettled him. There was pride in her posture, steel in her tone. She didn't care who he was, but he couldn't stop staring at her hands. And that's when he saw it. A ring, delicate silver, set with a small, deep blue sapphire. Too elegant, too personal to be random. It gleamed against her dark skin like something sacred. His breath caught in his throat. He knew that ring, every detail. It was the last thing his mother had given him before she died. And he had given it away. To a girl, a promise, a childhood, a bond. And now here it was, on the finger of a woman who shouldn't exist in his world anymore. He staggered back a step, his voice dry and shaking. "Where did you get that ring?" Aaliyah Carter froze. Her hand instinctively curled into a fist, the glint of the sapphire ring vanishing beneath her calloused fingers. For a split second, her face hardened, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous: memory. She didn't look at him when she answered. "It was my mother's," she said, tone even but guarded. Daniel stared at her like she'd just pulled the earth out from under his feet. He stepped forward, eyes locked on her hand. "Why do you have it?" he pressed, voice lower now, more fragile. "Where did she get it?" Aaliyah turned slowly, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes, deep brown and unreadable, scanned his face, not the man in the silk shirt, not the CEO, but the boy buried beneath all that polish. "Why are you asking like it belongs to you?" Daniel hesitated. The heat, the steam, the ticking clock, it all blurred. He couldn't feel any of it anymore. All he could see was a faded image in his mind. A girl with wild curls and wide eyes, sitting under a tree with him at the orphanage. A promise exchanged between two lost kids. A ring slipped onto her finger, too big for her tiny hand. He had forgotten her name, but not that moment. He swallowed hard. "Because I gave that ring to someone a long time ago at Open Heart Orphanage." That was when Aaliyah's expression cracked, just slightly, but enough. She turned back to her truck and slammed the toolbox shut. "If the car breaks down again," she said, voice clipped, "my shop's 10 miles past the Aurora City sign. First right." "Wait," Daniel stepped forward. "Just wait." But the engine of her pickup roared to life, drowning out his words. Aaliyah didn't look back as she drove off, tires kicking up dust that settled slowly around Daniel, or sent Daniel like ash. That night, Aaliyah didn't sleep. She sat in the corner of her small room above the workshop, the same room she had lived in for over a decade, clutching a worn wooden box to her chest. Inside were scraps of the past she had never thrown away. Newspaper clippings, yellowed photos, a business magazine with Daniel Whitmore's face plastered on the cover under the headline, "The youngest CEO to reshape real estate in the West." She opened it to a page where he smiled confidently beside Sienna Blake, his fiancée, the perfect power couple. Her fingers trembled as she traced the curve of his jaw on the page. It was the same boy, the same eyes. But the man, he hadn't remembered her. He'd recognized the ring, not the girl who had waited 20 years wearing it. "Of course," she whispered bitterly. "You never saw me back then either." The next morning, Daniel showed up. Gone were the sharp suit, the polished shoes, the platinum confidence. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, a man stripped of pretense. His expression was cautious, hopeful maybe, but shaken. Aaliyah stepped into the garage, wiping her hands with a rag. She didn't speak first. "We're open," she said flatly. Daniel held something in his hand. "I didn't come for repairs," he said. "I came to return this." He opened his palm. In it was a small wooden brooch, carved into the shape of a bird in flight. Its wings outstretched, smooth and imperfect in a way only handmade things could be. Aaliyah went still. He stepped forward, voice quieter now. "You gave this to me. It was your first carving, remember? You said birds were meant to fly free." She blinked fast, her lips parted, but no words came. "I never forgot that," he said. "I forgot your name. I forgot everything I should have remembered. But I kept this, all this time." Silence wrapped the room like a blanket. Then a voice came from the back of the shop. "So the boy who made promises finally shows up." Malcolm Carter emerged, wiping his hands on a rag, tall, graying, with eyes that saw straight through people. He stood beside Aaliyah like a silent shield. Daniel met his stare. "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I need a chance to explain." Aaliyah exhaled, stepping back. "You want the truth?" she said. "Fine, let's start with mine." She gestured to a workbench, pulling out a thin file folder. Inside were pages, property records, court filings, and something darker. A signed contract bearing Victor Whitmore's name. Daniel's heart dropped. What is this? Aaliyah's voice didn't waver. This is how your father stole my family's land. Daniel Whitmore stood frozen, staring down at the documents spread across the workbench like pieces of a crime scene. The papers looked ordinary. Contracts, deeds, signatures. But what he saw was anything but. His father's name was on every single page. Victor Whitmore. Signatures in confident black ink, bold and final, authorizing the transfer of land, silencing disputes, overriding claims. I don't understand, Daniel said, though part of him did. Somewhere in his gut, he felt the ugly truth start to rise like bile. My father said the land was purchased legally, that it was abandoned. Aaliyah let out a low, bitter laugh. Abandoned? She echoed. My mother didn't abandon anything. She was forced to disappear. Daniel looked up, but her eyes weren't accusing. They were steady, unwavering, filled with a pain he couldn't begin to measure. Her fingers rested gently on the edge of a faded black and white photo. A young black woman with warm eyes, wearing the same sapphire ring Aaliyah wore now. Aaliyah Carter. I was 6, Aaliyah continued. The last night I saw her, she tucked me in and said she'd be back before sunrise. She never came home. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. For years, Malcolm told me she'd been taken somewhere safe, that she'd send for me, but no letters ever came. No calls, just silence. Daniel felt a dull ringing in his ears. But why would my father? Because your father wanted the land, Malcolm cut in, stepping forward, and he wanted no legal heirs to get in the way. The Carter property sits on the largest freshwater reserve in the state. He knew it. That land is worth billions. Daniel rubbed his temples, backing away from the table. This can't be real. It's real, Aaliyah said softly. I spent years digging for proof. That contract? She pointed. It was signed under duress, and that, she pulled out one last document, yellowed with age, is a forged death certificate. Daniel's breath caught. Victor Whitmore declared my mother dead, she said, on paper, so he could seize the land uncontested. Silence fell over the room like a curtain. Daniel stepped away, reeling. He looked like a man unraveling. For the first time in years, he didn't know who he was supposed to defend. His family or the truth. I don't even know what to say, he whispered. You don't have to say anything, Aaliyah replied, picking up the folder and closing it with care. You just need to decide whose side you're really on. That night, Daniel didn't go home. Instead, he returned to the Whitmore estate, alone, silent, and not as a son, but as a man on a mission. He walked the long marble halls of his childhood like they were haunted. And in some ways they were. His father's study was still locked, but Daniel had learned a long time ago how to make his own keys. Inside, the room was exactly as Victor had left it. Sterile, pristine, organized with military precision. Daniel went straight to the hidden file cabinet, the one behind the false panel beneath the bookshelf. It took minutes, not hours. He knew the layout like the back of his hand. The folder was marked Project Aurora. His heart pounded as he opened it. Inside were contracts, memos, land assessments, legal threats, and then one small envelope, thin, sealed. When he opened it, his hands began to shake. It was a copy of Aaliyah Carter's death certificate, dated, signed, and stamped. But now Daniel recognized the notary's seal. It had been falsified, the same clerk who had disappeared mysteriously 6 months later. Daniel's jaw clenched. His father hadn't just lied. He had orchestrated a cover-up. He dropped into the chair behind the desk, burying his face in his hands. Every foundation his life had been built on, wealth, legacy, control, was cracked, corrupted, and worse, it had cost someone her mother. The next morning, he was back at Aaliyah's shop. This time he didn't knock. She looked up from an engine she was working on, brows furrowing as he entered. I found it, Daniel said simply. The project file, everything. You were right. Aaliyah didn't react. She just waited. And there's something else, he added, pulling a folded letter from his jacket pocket. I think your mother might still be alive. Aaliyah's face shifted, slowly, like a tremor beneath stone. What are you talking about? He stepped closer, his voice low, serious. She was never in a grave. There's no record of a burial. And this, he held up the letter, was sent 8 years ago. Anonymous, unsigned, but the handwriting, it matches hers. I had it verified. Aaliyah reached out, took the letter, her fingers trembling slightly. I think Victor's been hiding her, Daniel said, and I think I know where. The letter felt like it weighed 100 pounds in Aaliyah's hands, thin, folded carefully, yet at the edges. But it wasn't the paper that had left her frozen. It was the handwriting, delicate, looping, unmistakably hers, her mother's. She hadn't seen that script since the last note tucked beneath her pillow as a child. Be brave, my little bird, I'll be back soon. But her mother never came back. Aaliyah sat down slowly on the stool beside the workbench, her fingers gripping the letter like a lifeline. Daniel stood across from her, silent, letting her breathe. Where did you find this? She asked finally. Daniel didn't hesitate. Tucked in a secure file, on a private Whitmore property in New Hope. A clinic, one that isn't registered under the family name, but it's funded through a subsidiary of our company. You think she's there? Aaliyah asked, her voice thin, trembling. I think she's been kept there, Daniel said, quietly, for years. The words dropped like stones between them. Aaliyah stood, her heart racing. She couldn't sit still. Not now. Then what the hell are we waiting for? Daniel raised a hand. I've thought about this. If we go charging in, we might lose her again. Victor will know we're on to him, but there's one place we can expose him. She looked at him sharply. He nodded. Tonight, the project's groundbreaking ceremony. Aaliyah narrowed her eyes. The one that's supposed to happen in 2 weeks? Daniel took a breath. He moved it up, quietly, probably because he suspected something was leaking. He wants the press to focus on the development, not the history behind it. Aaliyah's heart thudded. So what are you saying? I'm saying we go, Daniel said. Together. I'll get you on that stage. You tell your story. You hold up that letter. You show the world what he's done. She stared at him, her pulse wild. You want me to confront the man who destroyed my life? In front of cameras? I want you to take it back, he said. Your life, your land, your name. By evening, the complex was ablaze with lights. The towering steel and glass structure gleamed under spotlights as Aurora City's elite arrived in black cars and formal wear. Cameras flashed, reporters hustled, champagne flowed like water. No one noticed the modest sedan that pulled in through the staff entrance. Inside it, Aaliyah smoothed her dark jacket and adjusted the sapphire ring on her finger. Her stomach turned, but her hands were steady. Daniel, sitting beside her, wore a dark tailored suit, stripped of his usual armor. His face was pale but resolute. I've arranged it all, he said. You'll speak right after my father gives his opening remarks. Aaliyah stared at the massive stage being prepared at the edge of the building site. The same soil her family once owned. The same land they'd been erased from. I never thought I'd be back here, she whispered. You're not just back, Daniel replied. You're about to burn the whole illusion down. Victor Whitmore stood at the podium, charisma turned up to full volume. He gripped the mic with the same confidence that had built an empire. Today, he said to the crowd, we celebrate not just innovation, but transformation. From humble earth, we rise toward a better future. The audience applauded. From backstage, Aaliyah watched, her nails digging into her palms. Next to her, Malcolm Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. She hadn't expected him to come, but he had, like he always did. You ready? He asked. No, she whispered, but I'm going anyway. As the applause faded, Daniel stepped forward, mic in hand, jaw tight. My father forgot to mention, he said, voice clear and cutting through the crowd's murmurs, that this land wasn't always ours. Victor turned, confused. This complex, Daniel continued, was built on stolen soil. The silence hit like thunder. Daniel gestured. I'd like to invite someone up. You hear, someone with a story that should have been told a long time ago. Aaliyah stepped onto the stage. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The lights hit her full on. The ring on her finger caught it, throwing blue sparks into the dark. My name is Aaliyah Carter, she began. And this land used to belong to my family. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She held up a copy of the forged death certificate. 20 years ago, Victor Whitmore faked my mother's death to take it. He said we disappeared, but the truth is we were erased. Whispers rose. Reporters surged forward. She pulled out the letter. Her hands didn't shake this time. My mother didn't die. She was taken, hidden, institutionalized, silenced. Victor strode forward, his voice hard. This is slander. She has no proof. A voice called out from the crowd. Yes, she does. Heads turned, a woman stepped out of the shadows supported by Malcolm. Her hair was streaked with gray, her frame thinner, slower, but her eyes were unmistakable. Aaliyah Carter. Aaliyah froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Mom, she whispered. Lena stepped forward. Her voice was soft but strong. I never stopped looking for you, baby. Aaliyah fell into her arms. The crowd erupted in stunned silence, followed by chaos. Flashes, screams, questions shouted. And Daniel stood between his father and the woman who had just torn down decades of lies. Victor was pale, visibly shaken. You don't know what you're doing, he hissed at Daniel. You're destroying everything I built. No, Daniel replied, eyes burning. You did that the day you chose power over people. Later that night, as police escorted Victor Whitmore away in handcuffs, Daniel stood beside Aaliyah and Lena, the three of them watching the lights of the building dim. What happens now? Aaliyah asked. Daniel looked out at the land. We rebuild, the right way. Lena took her daughter's hand, together. And for the first time in 20 years, Aaliyah Carter didn't feel like someone searching for justice. She felt like someone who had found it and wasn't letting go. The crowd had dispersed, but the weight of what had happened still clung to the air like smoke after a fire. Spotlights dimmed, reporters packed up their gear, and the security teams escorted Victor Whitmore into the back of a waiting police car, his expression a mixture of disbelief and quiet, festering rage. Daniel stood frozen on the stage, unable to move, unable to breathe. He had always known his father was ruthless. He had heard the whispers in boardrooms, had read between the lines in polished speeches, but he never imagined this. Fraud, kidnapping, the imprisonment of an innocent woman, the destruction of an entire family, and he had been a part of it. Unwitting, but still complicit. You okay? Aaliyah asked gently, stepping beside him. Her voice was soft, grounding. Her mother stood a few feet away, quietly speaking with Malcolm as paramedics checked her vitals. Daniel didn't respond right away. He was still staring at the police car's red and blue lights as they flickered against the steel and glass of the Whitmore building. No, he finally said, but I will be. Aaliyah nodded, understanding more than she let on. But then came a voice Daniel didn't expect. You forgot something, said Sienna Blake. They turned as the tall, elegant woman stepped out of the shadows, holding a leather-bound folder in her hands. Her calm demeanor was more dangerous than anger, measured, icy, and precise. I figured if we were going to end the night with fireworks, she said, we might as well go all the way. Daniel frowned. Sienna, what is that? Sienna handed him the folder, then crossed her arms. I did some digging when our engagement became a business transaction. Turns out, your father has a habit of covering up more than just land grabs. Daniel opened the folder, and the ground beneath him shattered. Inside were adoption records, sealed documents, medical files, DNA test requests denied, a pattern of manipulation, and a birth certificate. His, except, not quite. His name wasn't Daniel Whitmore. It was Daniel Carter. Aaliyah stepped closer. Her eyes scanned the documents, and her breath hitched. No, she whispered. Daniel stared at the page, unblinking. What does this mean? Sienna exhaled. It means you were never Victor's biological son. You were adopted from Open Heart Orphanage, a few months after Lena Carter was committed. Records were altered, birth files destroyed. He took you to replace the child he lost. Aaliyah looked like she'd just been punched. Her hand went to the sapphire ring as if it could somehow tether her to reality. He took you, she said slowly. He took you, Daniel, just like he took our land, just like he took my mother. Daniel stumbled back, shaking his head. No, this... This isn't real. There would have been something. Someone would have said. No one said anything because no one knew, Sienna cut in. Victor made sure of it. You were the perfect replacement. Clean medical history. No family to question it. You fit right into his narrative. A silence, sharp and terrible, fell between them. Malcolm and Lena approached slowly, sensing the shift in energy. Daniel turned to Lena. Is it true, Yediye? His voice cracked. Am I your son? Lena stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an old photo, faded but clearly visible. A boy and a girl under a tree. Aaliyah, maybe 5 years old, and a toddler in her lap smiling up at her. My children, she said softly. Aaliyah covered her mouth. Daniel's eyes went wide. I had two, Lena continued. Twins. I was told my son died in the hospital during delivery. I never saw his body. I mourned him every day. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. He sat down on the edge of the stage, staring at the photo like it might burn through his hands. I remembered the orphanage, he murmured. I always thought I just didn't have anyone, but I had a sister. You had a family, Lena said, tears in her eyes, until Victor Whitmore decided it didn't suit his plan. Aaliyah knelt beside Daniel, reaching for his hand, and suddenly everything made sense. The ring, the bond, the strange, aching familiarity that neither of them could ever explain. They were siblings, split by greed, reunited by truth. Daniel looked at Aaliyah, voice barely audible. I gave you that ring, and didn't even know it came from our mother. Aaliyah laughed through tears. You always did have a flair for dramatic timing. They sat like that for a long time, hands linked, no words left between them. Just the raw, aching relief of finally knowing who they were, where they came from, and what had been stolen from them. Later that night, the media storm broke like a tidal wave. Victor Whitmore arrested in decades-long land fraud scandal. Illegally institutionalized woman reunited with children after 20 years. Whitmore empire in collapse after DNA revelation. Board members resigned, investors withdrew. The Whitmore name, once etched in stone, began to crumble. And Daniel Carter walked away from it all. He renounced the Whitmore name publicly, transferred ownership of the Aurora complex to the Carter family, announced the repurposing of the site into an environmental sanctuary and community center. Not for redemption, but for restoration. A week later, Daniel and Aaliyah stood outside the gates of Open Heart Orphanage, a place where promises had been made and innocence taken. Now it would be rebuilt. Together with their mother at their side, they laid the foundation for the Carter Foundation for Forgotten Children. And for the first time in years, they didn't feel like broken pieces trying to survive the world. They were a family, finally whole. 6 months later, the morning sun stretched softly over Aurora Valley, no longer casting its light on steel and shadows, but on trees replanted where glass towers once loomed. The air smelled like earth, fresh paint, and possibility. Where the Whitmore corporate complex was once rising, now stood the Carter Community Center and Nature Reserve, an open space for healing, for rebuilding what had been stolen. In the heart of it all, Aaliyah Carter stood beneath a wide oak tree, adjusting the wrench in her hand as she tightened the last bolt on a restored vintage pickup. Her overalls were stained, her hands smudged with oil, but her eyes glowed with peace. Beside her, the new sign was being lifted into place. Hope Mechanica, reclaimed, rebuilt, remembered. Inside the workshop, a small office buzzed with quiet energy. Daniel Carter leaned over a desk scattered with paperwork for the Carter Foundation, grants for underfunded orphanages, proposals for education centers, letters from children who now had names, support, and futures. He no longer wore suits, no more platinum watches or boardroom speeches. Today, he wore denim and purpose. I'm still not used to the quiet, he said, looking up as Aaliyah entered, wiping her hands on a cloth. She smirked. Better than corporate nonsense and fake applause. Daniel chuckled. Way better. They walked outside together, their mother Lena already waiting under the shade, holding a tray of lemonade in her weathered, steady hands. Her face no longer carried the weight of silence or secrecy, just strength and joy. You two work too much, Lena said warmly, setting down the glasses. You've earned a moment to breathe. Daniel took a sip, glancing down at the small wooden bird brooch now hanging from a chain around his neck. We lost 20 years. I don't want to waste another minute. Aaliyah looked at the sapphire ring still shining on her finger. It kept us connected, she said softly. Even when we didn't know it. Lena nodded. That ring was never about wealth or promises. It was about blood, about truth. For a moment, none of them spoke, because they didn't need to. They had unraveled an empire built on lies. They had found each other in the wreckage. And now, from the same soil once soaked in greed, something honest had finally bloomed. The future wasn't flawless, but it was theirs, together, in a world where power often buries truth and silence is bought with wealth. It's easy to believe that justice is out of reach. But stories like Daniel and Aaliyah's remind us, no lie lasts forever. What's buried will surface. What's stolen can be reclaimed. And even the deepest wounds can begin to heal when we choose truth over fear and family over legacy. Because family isn't always about blood, it's about who stays, who searches, and who stands beside you when everything else falls apart. Now we want to hear from you. Did this story touch something in you? Have you ever lost someone or something only to find it again in an unexpected way? Share your thoughts, feelings, or your own story in the comments below. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.